It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. I'm Pete Francis, joined by Willie Witten. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to get all the latest videos. And please hit that like button. Apparently, it helps with YouTube's algorithm. Willie and I are not so sure about that, but do it anyway because it makes us feel good. Right, Willie?
That's right.
All right, so this week we're going to kick things off with Richie Kotzen. Now, on Friday, Richie Kotzen released the Smith-Kotzen album with Adrian Smith. Now, this is an album that you actually reviewed, Willie. You gave it a pretty good score, probably an album of the year type contender. Here's my question for you. Do you think Richie Kotzen is the most prolific rock artist out there today?
I think, yeah, if we talk about terms of output, sure, I think he is. He is in the club of the album per year club. And also he's like the other members of that club, the people who are always putting out new material. It's not, he's not throwing it out there just to throw something out. All the things he releases are well thought. They're considered, they're of the highest quality, I believe. And even in the album of like once in a while, you'd have maybe a double album. He didn't really get the tour behind it yet because of the pandemic, but his 50 for 50 album, which was a solo outing, 50 songs on an album in 1 year.
Which is absolutely insane.
It's insane when you think about it. And I'm not saying that in and of itself makes for a good album, but the songs are good on the album. There are some bands out there, Pete, that they'll release 50 songs over 5 years as a band.
Right.
So as far as prolific goes, he's certainly in the running. What do you think? Who else is putting out more quality material?
Well, Will, you mentioned he puts out an album with 50 songs, and this comes from a guy that literally puts out albums every single year. You know, he's got a solo album pretty much every single year. He put out albums with the Winery Dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this guy is just so prolific. But what really sticks out to me with Richie Kotzen is you don't see any drop off in quality.
No.
And this is one of those rare artists that he really is that triple threat artist that we talk about sometimes. Right. Phenomenal guitar player, just amazing guitarist, incredible singer. He's got vocals like Chris Cornell.
Yep.
And then he writes really good songs. And it's interesting because Richie Kotzen, he's been at this for a really long time, but really I feel like it's only more so in the last 5 years or so, probably since he started with the Winery Dogs, that his name is really starting to get out there to a wider audience that he's really deserved for many years. But yeah, I think he's absolutely phenomenal, Willie.
I think the one aspect where, you know, as far as just quality and quantity, he's there. I think as far as being well known as some other bands like, we can talk about the Black Keys, we can talk about Joe Bonamassa, we could talk about Gary Clark Jr., Rival Sons. There are names that are more recognizable. So in that department, maybe he's sort of getting the short end of the stick. I think, and I don't know if you agree with this, Pete, I think perhaps, and I'm just throwing this out there, that one of the reasons why it's only of late where he's getting as well known as he's becoming, I think a lot of his stuff is pretty technically advanced. I think listeners will probably need to have a true serious appreciation and a zeal for the guitar. Otherwise, some of the stuff might be a little too much for some listeners to handle. I mean, this is just what I'm thinking. It's very advanced, very diverse. And I think that maybe that's hard for some people. Or Pete, am I just barking up the wrong tree with that
I kind of disagree with you on that, Willie. I think he does obviously play a lot of advanced stuff, but I think he writes great songs. I think more of it is to do with the fact that he is an independent artist. So
Right.
He's releasing these solo albums completely on his own. So similar to Joe Bonamassa, he's kind of been building this audience album after album after album, tour after tour after tour. And I really think he does have great songs. I think it's just a matter of people getting exposed to them. But right now, as far as the rock world, he's carving out a great niche. You look at a lot of his music videos on YouTube, these things are all blowing up. All the music videos he's been putting out in recent years are blowing up. Another thing that really impresses me about Richie Kotzen, and he's a total musician, Willie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he can play the keys, he can play the bass, he can play drums. I mean, the guy literally does it all.
Yeah, he does. He produces, does the whole thing. It's a one-man show if he wants to. That's why I thought it was so great to see him with Adrian Smith, the two of them together. It's just even better. And I gave the album a 9. I thought it was awesome. It was one of those case in point of the sum is greater. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. They come up with something new. I loved it.
And they really complement each other well on the album too.
Oh, they're great. They play as if they'd been doing it for years. So that's great. I recommend it to anyone. I thought it was a fantastic album. Speaking of something a little more local, at least for me, Pete, down here in
and
Austin,
prolific artists.
Yep, he's one of them too, and he's starting it up again. And by that, I mean playing live. Joe Bonamassa is in town here in Austin to play a couple shows at the ACL. But Pete, he's doing a little something different. Not only is he playing the live show, he is also
doing the live stream. And we saw Bonamassa do the live stream before. And we both watched that live when it happened. And it was interesting because obviously the technical aspects of it, the production was really, really top notch and really well done. You know, watching a Bonamassa live stream is not like watching someone's random Facebook Live. I mean, you're getting the real deal, the same sort of thing that you would get on a Bonamassa DVD. That's what you're getting in the live stream. Right. So the quality, really well done, really good. The weird parts are when he stops playing and it's just silence. You don't hear anything. So, but now what's interesting, Willie, is now artists are starting to get back to doing some live shows. And I think that's really going to start picking up now this summer as more people are getting vaccinated. More artists are getting back out on the road now and playing these live shows. And I think perhaps with what happened with the pandemic in the long run, you may see more of this live show plus streaming option, which in the long run could actually help out musicians, especially artists like Joe. So he's doing this live show now in Austin, like a socially distanced show, but you're getting the live stream as well. So people all over the world can tune in. So, I mean, I think it's a good idea. And I think it's something we'll probably see more of as time goes on. It's just going to be interesting because I don't know if every artist can necessarily pull that off, because if you want to get that high level production, you know, you're going to have to shell out some money for that.
Right.
But it's going to be interesting to see which sort of venues offer that option for artists to do that.
And I think that that's a key thing, Pete. I think eventually I see this going into something that venues carry the option that they then get a chunk of from the artist. Because like you said,
I think it makes it more practical that way.
Yes, because if you're Joe Bonamassa, go ahead. We'll bring our own crew. Doesn't matter. But for most artists, that is not optional. Like it defeats the purpose of the extra revenue. Or maybe it doesn't defeat the purpose of the extra revenue, but you need that starting nest before you can build up that team. So I think the venues have a bigger nest. I think they'll be the ones that offer it as part of the package to the artist and then through them to the consumer. I think in the short term, it's great for artists. I do. I think it's a newfound way to make up the revenue gap that has happened as a result of less physical sales. I think this fits in nicely there.
And another thing, Willie, with this show, it's a socially distanced show. So Bonamassa is not going to be able to have as many people attend that would normally attend his shows. So that kind of helps recoup some of that loss there that he would have gotten.
My concern looking to the farther future, and I'm talking 4 or 5, maybe even 10 years down the line, is as this becomes the norm or more normal and venues offer this. We've spoken about this before when we were kids growing up. If there was an option to go check out the ball game, we would always jump at it. We always wanted to go. And you take the traffic, you take the weather, you take the cost, and you do it because it's the best. Fast forward 20, 25 years later, and a lot of people are just choosing to stay home. I worry about the short-term benefit eclipsing perhaps, and this is not to say that this is what's going to happen, but I feel like there's a small chance that 10 years from now, we look back and say, the death of the modern concert live experience in person is due to the rise in streaming, as we've seen sometimes with movie theaters, as we've seen sometime with live sporting events. I'm a little bit nervous looking into that crystal ball 10 years, but I certainly think in the short term, it's great for artists and here to stay.
Yeah, I think as far as people who are used to going to live shows and are comfortable going to live shows, I don't think it's going to end up affecting them too much. But it's an interesting point, Willie. Younger people who maybe haven't experienced as many live concerts and shows, how much is it going to affect them? You know, are they the kind who are just going to rather stay home than actually go experience that? Because they really don't know the difference at that point.
Right. It's true.
All right. We're switching gears now, and we're going to talk singles. And singles have pretty much taken over. Obviously, we still have albums, but nowadays artists are super strategic about releasing singles. Some of them are releasing a single with a music video like every month or every 2 months. So, Willie, do you like this singles-oriented world, or do you prefer it more so when artists are just releasing traditional albums?
I, hands down, prefer the traditional album methodology. I grew up on albums. I think it's nice to see it gives a good distinct period of time where it's one idea in a set time. As you go to singles, what I think disappears is that ability to view different periods of artists' artistic growth. So I think there's a chance that we lose that. We lose some concept albums. We lose some, I don't know, differentiation in studio production, where they made the studio, where they made the album, in which studio, with what producers. I think that starts to blur together. However, I think for someone like me, I can be a little bit short-sighted. Think about it. A long time ago, music was a singles market as far as the radio. And it really can be looked at as the albums weren't the norm. It was the album era that was the outline, the not normal idea. Because it certainly started for decades. It was radio driven. In this case, radio has been supplanted by Spotify and the like. But I think this is almost just a return to how music started.
Yeah, Willie, I think as a fan, it's nice to get that new track from an artist you like once a month, or maybe every 2 months or every 3 months. That's pretty cool. But I like the experience of getting an entire album at once and having the entire album be brand new to me. I really enjoy that. And then I find it easier, especially from someone who reviews albums from time to time. If you're reviewing an album, I like everything to be fresh.
Yeah.
Everything to be brand new. Because if there's a new album that comes out, but I've heard 2 of the songs 6 months ago, if I was judging that album or reviewing that album, it's kind of hard to do that when you've already heard 2 of those songs or 3 of those songs like 6 months in advance. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I like going in with kind of a clean slate because I feel like there's a lot more to dive into and a lot more to enjoy. It's kind of interesting. When Gary Clark Jr. was coming out, he released the Bright Lights EP, which had 4 tracks on it. And Bright Lights was just a big time smash hit for Gary Clark Jr. And so he released his first full length album, maybe a year or year and a half, something like that afterwards. And Bright Lights was still on that album. But I remember listening to his debut album, and I think I had pretty much heard almost all the songs on that album when it came out, except for maybe 4 or 5 were new. So I remember kind of reviewing that album, and I'm like, it was kind of hard to review it because a lot of it I had already heard.
Right.
And I still thought Bright Lights was the best song on that album. But it's kind of hard to judge that when you'd already heard that song like a year and a half ago. Well, so it's kind of interesting when you have all these singles coming out and then opposed to just digesting everything at once.
I agree. I don't love it as much either, but I do think it's something that, to a degree, unless the industry changes, I think it's something that we're going to have to get used to. We're going to have to consume it that way because we can go back. I know it was a show months ago we did when we talked about Mr. Eck at Spotify. He pretty much put the artist's feet to the fire and said, hey, what have you done for me lately? And honestly, I don't love that idea, but it sort of fits in with the way we as a society process things. We don't like waiting anymore. We expect things to be
very content-driven world that we're in. What have you done for me lately? Exactly. You got to continually produce, or you're going to get left behind.
I think, Pete, that's really, you hit it on the head. That's it. If you're not producing all the time, people forget about you. They will immediately turn to something that is new. And these streaming services, they will prioritize those artists that do what they have asked the artist to do. At least I believe, they may not say it, but I think that they have enough power to go ahead and get the artists to produce music the way they want to. There will be some holdouts, Pete, but what do you think? I mean, who's going to really fight in the face of Spotify?
It's a good question, Willie. Good question.
So I don't know.
Well, what do you guys think about that? We want to know what you guys think. Let us know. Leave your comments down in the comments section below. We do read all the comments and we definitely appreciate it. So please leave the comments because we have some great topics this week that we had to discuss. But that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Blues Rock Show. For Willie Witten, I'm Pete Francis. We'll see you next time.